In this video, I'm going to explain how the pancreas maintains blood glucose and what happens in diabetes mellitus. So first of all, maintaining. Notice that you have to maintain homeostasis of blood glucose. You need it to stay about 90 to 100. Different books will give different numbers, but they all hover around 100 as the ideal blood glucose level. So throughout the day, your blood glucose fluctuates. Every time you eat, it goes up. So every time you eat a meal or you have a snack, your blood glucose goes up. Your pancreas detects this and it secretes insulin. Insulin makes your cells take up glucose from the blood. And your cells are going to use that glucose to make ATP, and extra glucose that you don't need for making ATP is going to be stored in the liver as glycogen. So insulin reduces blood glucose level. And it does this in two ways. It makes your cells use glucose for ATP, and it makes your liver store extra glucose as glycogen. Think of your liver as your bank account. If you have extra money, you can put it in your savings account in your bank. And then later, when you need money, you can withdraw it from your savings account in your bank. So this is what happens every time you eat. Your blood glucose goes up, your pancreas secretes insulin, that takes glucose out of your blood, and either your cells use it or your liver stores it. And the result of this is your blood glucose goes back down to your homeostasis 100. Then you have between meals. Between meals, your cells still need to use glucose. Your cells need constant ATP. So between meals, you're using up the glucose from your blood. And this causes your blood glucose to drop. Well, again, your pancreas responds. So here's your pancreas. It will detect this, and this time it secretes a different hormone called glucagon. So glucagon and insulin are antagonistic. That means they're going to do the opposite of each other. Glucagon is going to tell your liver to return that stored glucose to the blood. Remember, your liver is your bank account. When you have extra money, you can deposit it. But then later when you need money, you can withdraw it. So that's what glucagon does. It tells your liver to put the stored glucose back into the blood. And this raises your blood glucose back up to 100. So between these two hormones, you keep your blood glucose at about 100. That's what you want. That's homeostasis. Then we have diabetes mellitus. Now you already learned that this means excessive urine with sugar, as opposed to diabetes insipidus, which is just excessive urine. There's two main types of diabetes mellitus. There is type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. This is when your immune system messes up and attacks your pancreas. So your immune system is there to attack diseases, to pathogens. Sometimes it messes up and it attacks yourself. So auto means self. Autoimmune is when your immune system attacks yourself. And by attacking the pancreas, it destroys its ability to make insulin. This typically occurs during childhood. If you're going to have type 1 diabetes, you usually have it by the time you're in your 20s. So it's also sometimes called juvenile diabetes because juvenile means you're not yet an adult. And people who have this are insulin dependent. This means that you rely on either injections or an insulin pump, because your body cannot make its own insulin. And if you don't get that outside source of insulin, you will die. The other one is type 2. Type 2 is genetic and lifestyle. So it's a combination of genetics and lifestyle. Your genetics give you a predisposition. Some people are born more likely to get this, and they have to be really, really careful of their lifestyle or they will. Other people are born very low risk and they can have a lousy lifestyle and still be fine and never get it. Basically, what happens here is if you have the genetics for it and you have poor diet and you lack exercise, this is the lifestyle part. Poor diet and a lack of exercise means you're going to have high blood glucose. If you're eating a lot of junk food, you're putting more sugar into your blood. Exercise would burn that sugar off, but if you're not exercising, you're not burning it off. So it's just sitting there and accumulating in your body. So the combination of poor diet and lack of exercise causes you to have high blood glucose. This means your pancreas has to work harder and secrete more insulin in order to control this glucose. And after years of making your pancreas work harder, you essentially wear it out. So type 2 diabetes is when you basically wear out your pancreas. You work it to death. Okay, the symptoms of these two different types of diabetes have a lot in common. Whether you're autoimmune and your immune system attacks your pancreas, or you overwork your pancreas and wear it out, either way, you lose the ability to control your blood glucose using insulin from your pancreas. So some of the symptoms of diabetes, remember the diabetes part means excess urine. The way that occurs is through osmosis. If you have all this high glucose, so we'll talk about some of the symptoms here. If you have high blood glucose, some of that gets filtered out by the kidneys and put in the urine. So that's where the mellitus part comes from, because the urine will be sweet like honey. And if you remember back to when we talked about water and solutes and osmosis, remember how water is attracted to solutes? Glucose is a solute. So this glucose in the urine attracts water. Right? And that is the process of osmosis. It's like a magnet. Glucose is like a magnet to attract water. So if there's glucose in the urine, it's going to attract more water into the urine. And that will therefore cause you to urinate more. Okay, then another sign of diabetes is excessive thirst. Well, the reason you're thirsty is that you're dehydrated because you're urinating so much. So you get sugar in the urine, which is osmotic. It attracts water, so it pulls water out of your blood and into your urine. That makes you urinate more. And then because you're urinating so much, you get dehydrated, which makes you thirsty. So being thirsty and urinating a lot are signs of diabetes. Also, you may have heard of diabetic ketoacidosis. One of the main problems that diabetics have is their blood pH. It's hard to regulate your blood glucose. It also becomes hard to regulate your blood pH. So remember, blood pH should stay at 7.4. If you're diabetic and you lack insulin, then you lack the ability for cells to use glucose to make ATP. So remember, cells need constant ATP. That's the energy in cells. If you have insulin, insulin is what allows your cells to use glucose to make ATP. Your cells have to have some sort of fuel for making ATP. If you lack insulin, your cells can't use glucose. They use fat instead. And when cells use fat to make ATP, that produces keto acids. All these keto acids reduce the blood pH. So sometimes people with diabetes end up in the emergency room and being hospitalized because their blood pH is too low. So this is the link. This is how diabetes can reduce blood pH. Without the insulin, your cells can't use glucose to make ATP, so they use fat to make ATP instead. And using fat for ATP production produces these keto acids. And these keto acids build up in the blood and they can drop the blood pH down to dangerous levels. So hopefully now diabetes and the two types of diabetes mellitus make some sense.